This video is about Leica 35mm Summicron ASPH, which is my favorite lens for using on my Leica M240. I have owned this lens for almost 5 years now, and I have used it in winter, under snow, under light rain, and in the heat of summer, so I can say that I have a really good experience with this lens. Like all Leica lenses, the build quality is great. It weighs 265 grams, but being made of metal mostly, it is really dense. In comparison, the Nikon 50mm f1.8D or the Nikon's Nifty 50 weighs much less, and it is a little bit larger than this one. The aperture clicks in half stops with equal distancing and solid clicks, and of course the aperture ring has enough space from focusing ring to prevent accidentally changing the focus when changing the aperture. And of course, speaking of focus ring, it has a focusing tab which is super useful for fast and also for accurate focusing. The focus ring takes around 120 degrees to go from close focus, which is 0.7 meters, to infinity. The lens hood is made of plastic, but in my opinion the quality is still good. And when the hood is attached to the lens, it feels really secure and doesn't fall off. To better use this lens for zone focusing, which is very common in street photography, I follow a set of well-known rules. When the focus tab is at 6 o'clock, the distance is set as 1.2 meters. If you move 45 degrees to the right, then the focus distance becomes 3 meters. And if you move 45 degrees to the left, it will become 0.8 meters. I put a piece of gaffer's tape on my camera so I can always remember the position of 6 o'clock, and if the distance is set at 3 meters and the aperture is set at f16, then everything from 1.5 meter to infinity is in focus. f11 narrows this range a little, but of course adds a full stop of light. And using f8 narrows this range from 2 to 10 meters. And of course, again, adds a full stop of light. In a very bright light, I never hesitate to go to up to f16 or f11. But when there is less light, I will use f8 and f5.6 and try to guess the distance from my subject as much as I can. And if I need to use f2 or f2.8, then obviously I use the viewfinder to focus. Here are some of my favorite shots, all taken with this technique. When it comes to sharpness and contrast, the lens is a solid performer from f2 all the way to f16. And there is no aperture value that I want to avoid because of image quality concerns. The vignetting does exist from f2, but at least it doesn't have a weird purple color, and of course it improves when you stop down. About the background blur or bokeh, I should say that although this lens is not a bokeh machine, As you can see in these samples, you can still get some very nice and smooth background blur when getting close to your main subject. Of course, it is highly subjective, but in my opinion, this bokeh is not nervous and looks very smooth and pleasing. When it comes to flare control, I should say that I rarely shoot directly into the sun. And during the past 5 years I have owned this lens, I could only find 2 samples, and in both of them you can see how the lens flares. However, I don't remember if I had a filter on the lens or not, and that might have contributed to the flare. But regardless of that, you can see that if you push this lens, this can flare. I did also my candlelit setup to see how the lens controls the candle flame in the dark, and there is noticeably less artifacts compared to my previous video with TT Artisan 50mm f/0.95. The viewfinder blockage is less than 1/8 of frame with hood, and if you remove the hood, then there is no blockage at all. I have used this lens on other mirrorless cameras, including a Leica SL that I had for a limited time thanks to Leica test drive program, and I can say that it is a very good match with the Leica SL. However, I still prefer my own M mount camera. And here are some sample shots taken with the Leica SL. Finally, I have to say it again that I really like this lens, and it is light and small and super easy to carry, and it doesn't block the viewfinder. The aperture and focus ring are really easy to operate even with gloves, and of course you can get the lens flare when shooting into the sun. But other than that, the sharpness and contrast are very good at all aperture values, and the background blur rendering is very nice and smooth. So I think this lens is gonna stay in my kit at least as long as I have a Leica M camera. So that's it. It was my experience with Leica M35mm Summicron spherical, and I want to thank you for watching this video, and if you have any questions, ask me in the comment sections, and also feel free to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram.